Basically, the transgender child is a technological, medical, political construct, and it was created to give the men that have this fetish of owning womanhood, who are very, very deeply involved in the medical tech industries, to give them political, legal, and social power to take their fetish to the zenith that they want to take it to, which is to own womanhood through reproductive technologies.
Hello there. I'm Zahra Sethna, host of the Collapse Life podcast. Welcome to another episode of this thinking person's guide to civilization and demise. If you're new to this podcast, we pride ourselves on wading into controversial waters in a smart and objective way. Whether that's COVID or climate change or censorship, we're here to discuss important topics that others might shy away from. If this sounds right to you, we hope you'll give this channel a like, hit the subscribe button, and share this with others so we can continue to grow. Today, we're touching on one of the most controversial topics of our time, transgenderism. Our guest is Jennifer Bilek, an author and investigative journalist who's done deep research into the financing and politics behind this movement. Her latest book is called Transsexual, Transgender, Transhuman, Dispatches from the 11th Hour. And we're so pleased to have her here today. Welcome, Jennifer.
Thank you, Zara. I'm really, really happy to be here.
I'm so looking forward to hearing all that you've uncovered here. This is, it's an incredible piece of work. And as we had discussed, as we were planning this, I mean, I think we could probably do a 3-hour Joe Rogan style podcast on all the information, but we'll try and hit the hard points at least in the next 45 minutes to an hour. So we are living through this really unique and chilling cultural moment right now where the idea of transsexualism has been couched as sort of the leading human rights issue of our time. And in your research and investigation, which you've been doing for quite a long time, you've uncovered this deep, fascinating web of money and power, and you've kind of laid bare that this movement is about anything but human rights. So just talk a little bit about that.
You're right. We can go on for hours. Well, yeah, I think that people are still basically in shock that men are being invited into women's safe spaces in their sports. And they're equally as captivated by people who are appropriating synthetic simulacrums of the opposite sex's sex characteristics. And so they sort of have a blind spot. They're not looking any further than that because that's what's been presented to them. But this really is obscuring the escalation of a personal fetish of adult men, transsexualism, clinically known as autogynephilia because it is a paraphilia, which is a compulsion, basically, to own womanhood for oneself for sexual gratification. So this fetish has escalated from the personal to industry scale. And so that's what we're witnessing here. And it has as its goal to not only appropriate, but to colonize, commodify, and ultimately usurp human reproduction through technology. And so, we're basically at the, I would say, the gestational phase of that takeover. And so the public is being groomed to accept these technological advancements.
So that's where kind of we want to get into. Before we do, let's just talk a little bit about what led you to this issue. How did you fall down this rabbit hole? It's not a fun place to be. I mean, you must have a lot of backlash against saying some of the things that you're saying, that this is a fetish and all of these things. So it's not something that you would carefully walk into.
Right. Well, I've been a campaigner for women's rights for most of my adult life. And, these men that have change their anatomy to resemble women's anatomy, have been trying to violate women's safe spaces for many decades now. And feminists and lesbian feminists have been at the forefront of protecting those spaces and trying to keep these men out. So I was aware of that aspect. But what really got me into this was a young man named Jazz Jennings, who is now 23 years old and has had myriad medical technological assaults on his reproductive system to resemble being a woman now. And he came onto the media scene in America when he was like 7 years old, or maybe even younger. He had an interview with Barbara Walters, and he was talking about his dissociation from his sex reality.
As difficult as it is for people to understand, you only had to walk into Jazz's bedroom, as I did.
Oh, how pretty.
To know this was not a passing fad. It was filled with girly things, dresses and dolls. But it was a picture she drew that made Jazz's world crystal clear.
Tell me about this picture. Why is the little girl crying?
Because she wants to wear the dress to school.
And Mommy won't let her?
Yeah.
But now, does Mommy let the little girl wear a dress?
Mm-hmm.
And this started to almost, become virulent at around the time that I got into this. And I was watching this whole thing unfold about the sensationalism around his dissociation from physical reality, and it being promoted as something good, normal, positive, if a little problematic, for him and his family. The thrust was really on progressive, good, and recognizing this as normal. Yeah, so when I started to write about this, I wrote about him with a colleague of mine for a feminist anthology called Female Erasure. And we wrote about it from the point of his dissociation and how that relates to other children's dissociations from physical reality via technology that they're using today. And also the profiteering angle. So, yeah, I went down a really deep money hole, too. Because I wanted to find out things like, why is this happening? And I'm an American, so if you want to find out anything in America, you look for the money.
Yes.
It usually tells you the story.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, I mean, I think it's going to be really interesting as we unpack this, because we do see this. And so you mentioned, there's a group of men who have a sort of a fetish pastime. I don't know how to even put it. But then there is also this group of young people, children and adolescents, who are falling into this trap as well. Are they fueled by the same thing? What is it, sort of a social phenomenon? What's happening? Because those seem like two distinct groups and perhaps two distinct processes.
They are. Basically, the transgender child is a technological, medical, political construct, and it was created to give the men that have this fetish of owning womanhood, who are very, very deeply involved in the medical tech industries, to give them political, legal, and social power to take their fetish to the zenith that they want to take it to, which is to own womanhood through reproductive technologies.
Okay. So terrifying. You recently wrote, so I'm getting there, but you recently wrote a Substack where you actually described the gender industry as a castration cult fueled by transhumanist ideology and profit. So talk a little bit about what you mean by the gender industry, and then we'll get into those intersections between technology and transsexualism and ultimately transhumanism.
Okay, well, these surgeries have not been going on all that long in terms of operating on children, and yet they, between the drugs and the surgeries, they're already in the billions of dollars by any market analysis. And there is plenty of market analysis about this. And just the fact that there are analytics on the profiteering of these surgeries tells you that it is an industry, in fact. And so in order to promote that industry and sell these surgeries and these drugs, you have to promote this body dissociation is progressive. And that promotion process has been raised to the level of cult indoctrination in terms of children. They're very much on their technologies, especially children that are not children that are vulnerable, young people that are vulnerable for whatever reasons. They're not getting as much socialization. They feel awkward. They're going through a particularly vulnerable puberty. They have autism. They're gay, and they're just discovering this about themselves. And they go on social media, and the promotion is absolutely relentless by influencers, by doctors, surgeons, by pharmaceutical industries, et cetera, et cetera. It's rife through our own media, the adult media faction, but children are really being inundated with this propaganda, this cult-like indoctrination.
It is crazy.
It's crazy. It's crazy.
It seems to have happened so quickly and right in front of our eyes. You mentioned that you're a lifelong feminist. You've been working on behalf of women's rights, and so it always boggles my mind how this has not become the leading issue around women's rights. And in fact, if you mention the kinds of things that we're talking about now, you get labeled a TERF, or you get all this shade thrown at you. Why do you think that that dichotomy has happened?
Well, first of all, the public has been indoctrinated to believe that this is a human rights because it's tied to the LGB. So the minute you try to talk about this issue, LGB comes into it. Now, LGB, same-sex attraction has been basically overall, even if you're not like rah-rah same-sex attraction, you've accepted it if you live in American culture, or Western cultures. So immediately this is seen as an attack. If you critique this is seen as an attack on LGB rights. So this has been provided fantastic cover of this industry.
Right. That's the end of it. This is a really nice way of fending off any attack. It's
exactly
you can't touch these people. These are already vulnerable people, and they deserve all the rights that everyone else does in society. And so you can't say anything about them. We've done this so many times with vulnerable groups.
Yes. And besides that, the critique is, anytime you try to critique it or provide an analysis, you're shut down. I've been no platformed. I've been shadow banned on social media. My information has really only happened because of a grassroots, sort of movement to get that information out into the public. Because if I had to rely on social media platforms not shadow banning me, I would be nowhere with this information.
Sure.
So, there's a feminist, Kara Dansky, who often speaks out about this issue broadly. And she says, if we can be heard, we'll win. And it's absolutely true. We are shut down like every place, the larger media platforms, Joe Rogan, Trigonometry, I can't think of like the bigger, broader podcasts right off the top of my head, but people are constantly like tweeting and retweeting, put her on, and nobody calls. I'm still waiting by the phone. And also the media is controlled by the medical tech industries. Right. Ultimately, there are only like 10 conglomerates of, media platforms. So when you think you're looking at, Vanity Fair or Time Magazine or, House and Garden or any of them, you're really looking at a conglomerate that is sending, its message through all of their platforms.
Yeah.
And they're all invested in the gender industry. So that message just, it gets out there. And if you want to be on a platform, well, you're going to mess with profits, if you start talking about this. So
Yeah.
censorship is another big issue. People can't understand what's going on because they can't hear it.
They're not seeing it. Yeah. And,
Yeah.
as you say, we've had transgender people on the cover of all those magazines. They're being named Woman of the Year. They're being given gold medal in the Olympics in women's sports. So it's something that for those who aren't questioning it, it's just like, oh, this is where we are now. And for those who do question it, you're just not allowed to really have your voice be heard without being called a right-wing crazy or a hateful person. So we're in a very interesting and very difficult moment. One of the things that you've uncovered in your research is the philanthropic backers behind this. Talk a little bit about that.
Woo! There is so much money, and there is such an incredibly huge network that is normalizing this as another way to be human, that it's pretty terrifying, really. And so I said earlier that most of the big backers and the big drivers of this technological cult are invested in technology, otherwise, and the medical industry. So you have John Stryker, who is heir to the medical corporation, Stryker Medical, which does medical equipment. So if you're in any hospital, you're going to see Stryker medical products. And they've recently got into the facial feminization market. And John Stryker also operates, founded the largest and probably the most significant LGBT NGO in America. And Tim Gill owns the other, founded and owns the other NGO, LGBT NGO, that drives this narrative culturally, institutionally, corporately, and politically. He founded Quark Press, which is a software company, computer software company, and he's now invested in AI, artificial intelligence. One of the richest families in America is a big driver of this ideology, the Pritzker family, and I've written about them pretty broadly, how they've used their money to have this ideology sent into the culture. And Jennifer Pritzker, one of their members, is a transsexual who announced in middle age, after fathering children, that he was suddenly a woman. And who's gonna cry about that when he pays their salaries, right? And he has his own philanthropic organization called the Tawani Foundation, which partners with Squadron Capital, which is a capital investment firm for medical technologies. And with his philanthropic institution, he sends billions of dollars into cultural institutions, medical institutions, colleges, military, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So, they're not the only ones, but I sort of have picked out some key players to get people to focus, because, this has got tentacles all over the place. So if you can just really narrow it down for people, they can start to understand it. So there are others, but and I discuss some of them in my book. But there's a lot of capital involved in this.
It's really surprising once you start to unpack it all, how deep that goes and how much money there is in this. I mean,
I'm still surprised after a decade. I'm like, oh my God,
it's
so big. There's now like 200 organizations, transsexual organizations, basically, that promote the normalization of this, fetish of adult men. Globally.
The other thing that I have found surprising and frightening is the technology, as you mentioned, the levels of technology that already exist or that are currently being researched and developed to basically replace female biological functions. I had no idea. You had a list of links within your recent blog post that went to things like replacing uterus, or actually growing embryos outside of a body, and all this technology that seems completely unnecessary and unethical and terrifying. Talk a little bit about some of that you've uncovered.
Well, you have to see it in terms of, advancements in technology. I mean, first you have like in vitro fertilization, and you have cryopreservation of either eggs or sperm, and, as the years go by, technology grows exponentially. And so more and more technologies develop, and you want to just hit the market with them because they're profitable. And you don't really think about, how is this going to transform humanity,
Mm-hmm.
So, and now they're researching putting wombs into men, transplanting them into men from women, or implanting them or transplanting them. I'm not sure how that works, which is a ridiculous concept. But here you go. I mean, it's going to make men with this fetish of owning womanhood comfortable. So we have to research this. And then you have like ectogenesis, which is growing children outside of the womb, like now they have a bio bag. I think there's been 4 lambs or something grown in a bio bag, and they've all died subsequently. So that technology isn't, very well advanced, and they're also looking at growing embryos in a dish, like from skin cells or from blood cells, creating gametes from those cells.
Yeah.
And that technology is a little bit further along, actually, than the, growing babies outside of the womb. But the very fact that they're researching this and sending this out to the culture as progressive and good and possible to liberate humanity from reproduction is absolute insane. It's insanity. Pathologically insane. Or I should say it's really more like pathological dissociation. We are being deconstructed basically for the market and for technological reproduction.
Mm-hmm.
We're not, we are actually whole biological systems that are related to in symbiosis with the natural world. But what this ideology is doing is breaking us into parts, where vaginas, where penises, where wombs, where ovaries, where chromosomes, where hormones. Basically, we are an entire biological system that is attached to and in symbiotic relationship with the natural world. But what this does is they're severing that connection with technology and attempting to create life themselves. And we are being children are being groomed. The next generation is really important to this process because the technologies will be much more developed at that point when they come of age. But they're being groomed to see themselves as separate from the biological world. They're being reduced to parts like penises, vaginas, chests, breasts, hormones, chromosomes, genes. Those little characters that they're using in grade schools really speak into this, like the dinosaur and the giraffe and the gender unicorn, where they have the body all cut up into different parts, and that your mind is separated from the rest of your body, as if that was possible. But yeah, this is a tech grooming process for the next generation.
Wow. You would think, technology is incredible, and we've been able to do things in society that at one point were unthinkable, but there was always a piece of it that yes, we could do that, but should we do that?
Don't you see the danger, John, inherent in what you're doing here? Genetic power is the most awesome force the planet's ever seen, but you wield it like a kid that's found his dad's gun.
I don't think you're giving us our due credit. Our scientists have done things which nobody's ever done before.
Yeah, but your scientists were so preoccupied with whether or not they could, they didn't stop to think if they should.
There needed to be some sort of a social license to operate before rolling out these kind of technologies. So maybe this sort of speaks to why there's been both the money put into the technology, but also this huge propaganda effort to make this normalized, to make this just something that we accept so that the technology can then be developed and rolled out. And there's actually a market for it. There's not just the supply, but an incredible demand for it. It seems insane.
Well, the speed part, the fact that it's been dumped into the culture at such a rapid pace and proliferated wildly, and the propaganda has been relentless, almost like a drumbeat. You can't get away from it. Is part of shocking people. They're being shocked. So most people that are shocked, the first thing they do is they stop whatever they're doing. They're in shock, right? You're like shocked. So this is really shocking the public, and then you're inundating them with this information, this new information, that we're not really a biologically dimorphic species. There's no sex binary. Sex is on a spectrum. Sex isn't real. And gender, transgender people, and this reverence around these people that are having technological assaults on their reproductive systems. This is all about traumatizing people and getting them to adopt this doctrine, this technological cult doctrine.
Yeah. Is it all just about money?
Well, I think it's about power. I think it's about dissociation. The further we get away from the natural world, the more we are entrenched in technology, the harder we become. So it's really about driving humanity towards a more intimate melding with technology, like cyborgification, you could call it. And people think, oh, that's craziness, that's nonsense. But, what's real nonsense and what's real crazy is trying to break the sex binary between male and female. That's crazy. This is not crazy. This speaks to all the developments that we're already seeing. Genetic manipulations, mRNA vaccines that go into our bodies, collecting our data, our health data, our bodily system data, and our thought process, collecting data on all of that. And AI, we can't hear enough about AI these days. Elon Musk's Neuralink just went to market. It's being implanted into people. So you're already seeing interfacing with artificial intelligence. This isn't crazy. This is actually happening. These are where the technologies are going. Yeah. And so anybody that thinks that crazy, that this is all crazy talk, all I have to say to them is really just do your research. Do a little bit more research. Yeah. Buy my book, because I discuss all of it and I have links to all of it. It's not crazy talk, and I haven't made it up. They're all speaking about it. It's just that, people aren't used to hearing about any of this within the context of the gender, narrative, right? That you're not allowed to go out of.
Right. Exactly. Is there a depopulation component to this as well? That, when we move towards this, just abolishing the idea of men and women, always the old fashioned way of thinking about it was boy meets girl, falls in love, has a family, that kind of thing. And that whole story is now being vilified. Is it to try and just have fewer humans on Earth?
I don't really know the answer to that, and I don't want to speculate on things that I'm not sure about. Yeah. What I am sure about is that they're trying to move technology to the tech sector and towards, with a goal of usurping human reproduction with technology. And where they're going beyond that, or where they think they're going beyond that, I suspect virtual reality, which is, Yuval Harari is considered one of our greatest intellectuals, right? And he's talking about this all the time. virtual reality laid upon the biological world. And that's what we're experiencing. People are believing in transgender people. There are no transgender people. This is a complete and total fabrication. This is a virtual reality. And the more we talk about transgender people, or gender identities, the more real it becomes. It's a virtual reality.
Right.
Or alternately, a cult.
Yeah, I think it's just two different words for the same thing. And I think a lot of children are already living in that virtual reality. I don't think we quite as adults understand how they see the world. I mean, they think that there are 96 different identities when it comes to gender, or that if you identify as a cat, you are a cat. And I think, that really is a virtual reality. That's another way of seeing the world that is not the same way that you and I see it. So that's where I think where you talk about it being like a cult indoctrination. And cults are very hard. They're easy to bring people into, very hard to get people out of. So what can we as adults in society do to sort of protect children from this?
Well, there's a woman I haven't met who's on social media who has actually gotten her daughter out of this cult. And some of the things I've heard her say is to remove them from the source of the indoctrination, which is technology. Cults before always had like a charismatic leader. And now we're dealing with a cult that doesn't really have one single charismatic leader, though Martine Rothblatt, who we can discuss, would probably be the closest thing that we have to that. But basically, this is engineered so that technology is taking care of that charismatic leader position. It is being, the indoctrination is being disseminated over technology, over social media. So like I spoke about earlier, to the TikTok influencers and the pharmaceutical industries and the surgeons themselves, all promoting this as a positive, good thing. If you have this little angst about this or about that, oh, you're probably transgender. You should get these surgeries, you should get these drugs. Everybody feels so much better after they've had them. And this is how you give yourself a shot. And, oh, I feel so much better. And look at my scars and aren't I fabulous? And there's also this reverence, like you see in other cults, for these people that are having these, manipulations of their sex characteristics.
Right.
You see this in other cults. That's what it's about. It's about, religious reverence cults, worshiping and devotion to this ideology, and that you're going to be purer, you're going to be better, you're going to be a better human being. So this is how it relates to other cults, right? That you're going to be technologically advanced. And this is a technological cult. So technology is viewed as God, as the Godhead, right? And you want to emulate and become like that, fuse yourself with this. And this is, worshipful. It incurs a reverence, for what you're doing, right? These people that are doing this, they're having their systems mutilated, are being looked at and promoted with reverence.
Yeah.
They're special, they're spiritual, they're different, they're great, they're so marginalized. We have to protect them,
Yeah. Yeah. And that in some ways they are more tapped into understanding their own being and their own purpose in life. And the rest of us are just held back by, binary definitions of society.
Cisness.
Cisness. Yeah. You mentioned him, and I think we need to talk about who is Martine Rothblatt.
Yeah. I've been writing about him for a decade, and people don't really get how pivotal he is for this cult. He really could be considered its leader in the fact that he's developed the ideology. He's written about it. He's basically written a blueprint about it. Transgender to transhuman.
Wow.
And he's written about the virtual realities and the tech usurpation of human reproduction. And he's basically a tech guru. He's very widely and well-renowned for his accomplishments. He's co-founder of Sirius XM satellite radio. He's worked on the human genome at the UN level. He started a pharmaceutical corporation, saved the life of one of his daughters. He calls himself a transsexual and a transhumanist. He lectures broadly about this issue, the bridging quality of transgender to transhuman from transsexual. Has appropriated female biology for himself. Believes that we will take over, technology, take over human reproduction with technology. And ultimately, he sees disembodiment, complete and total disembodiment, that we will be living in a virtual reality in cyberspace as the ultimate goal, like the Godhead. And he thinks that technology is God. He thinks that AI is basically human without flesh. And he goes around lectures and people celebrate him. They think he's brilliant and amazing. And he has certainly created a lot of accomplishments, but he's also pathologically dissociated.
Right.
To my estimation. And he also drafted the first gender bill. He's created the ideology. He created the legal structure with other transsexual lawyers. He's a lawyer as well. So you've probably seen him on TV with his robot wife. He has a robot wife.
Hello.
Hello, Bina 48.
Bina. I am Bina 48.
How are you feeling today?
Everything is okay. How are you?
I'm doing fine.
I am happy for you.
As well as a real wife. The robot is a facsimile of her, and he believes that he is implementing, putting her consciousness into his robot and creating life.
It boggles the mind, really. I mean, I think it escapes many people because it just seems so hard to accept, and they don't have the time to really sit down and think about it. And if they do, they just go, no, that can't be right, or I have just more important things to deal with in my life. And you've written about
men can be women if they say they are. That's not crazy. You can be born in the wrong body. If you think you are, that's not crazy, but this is crazy, right? I don't think so. I think they have it backwards.
The Paris Olympics, I think, were the perfect example of that, with the women's boxing controversy, which became controversial because so many people said, you can't criticize that person. That person's born in the wrong body, and, she has every right to be participating in that sport, and she has done in the past. And I mean, it's just, and so, before you even get to have a conversation, it's not a conversation anymore. It's a black and white binary argument. And a lot of people just don't want to wade into it. They just think, oh, that's somebody else's fight. But I think what you're highlighting is this is going to hit all of us. This is going to impact all of us. It's not just a small group of people who are experiencing this disassociation, because transhumanism, the plan is, it's coming for all of us.
Right. And I wouldn't say that's true for all of transhumanism. I mean, transhumanism is a pretty big field, right? But this particular set of transsexual transhumanism, as promoted, as developed by Martine Rothblatt, is going in that direction, complete and total dissociation from biological reality and showing us to technology. There are other sects of transhumanism that are really just improving our lot in life, like, for instance, automated limbs, AI implanted into limbs that are made for people that don't have arms and things like that. I mean, that's a pretty fascinating and wonderful, development, right? But yeah, it really, unless you examine these developments beyond their immediate service to humanity and profitability, then you're going to have problems down the road because you haven't thought out well enough how these are going to impact us. Right. And the technology is developing so fast now. And just setting it out into the market is just so dangerous,
Mm-hmm. I think you bring up a really interesting analogy there with, we have had technology like artificial hearts or limbs that have significantly improved the lives of people who needed that. And this, this often happens in the conversation about genetic modification of agricultural crops, where people say, well, ever since the beginning of time, we've been selecting the best apple and the best tomato, and that breeding those good aspects of it, and it sort of then negates the rest of the argument that some of these things are actually not good, or some of these things are just not needed. We have other ways of going about it. So I think it's just really interesting that you bring that up, because there are benefits to these technologies, as there could be benefits to pretty much any technological advance that we've had, but there's always a negative as well. One of the
And
things,
also when you raise the technology above the natural order and the natural world, you're just you're tempting the devil. You really are. I mean, I never even believed in the devil and God before I started investigating this stuff, and now I'm absolutely certain the devil exists.
Yeah. And just as you'd said, I was going to ask you about this. You'd said that, for a lot of people, technology is God. And that is something that can only happen in a culture where God has been abandoned, essentially, where people don't believe that God is a real thing. But they're looking for something to explain.
And they've been groomed away from the biological. Most people don't even know where their food comes from at this stage. We're the only species on the planet that couldn't support ourselves, if the grid went down for more than a few days. Yeah. So we're really already, people, think that transhumanism is some future, crazy sci-fi thing. It's not. It's right here. We're doing it. We're living it. Every day. We're driving around in spaceships. We're on these computers talking to each other, and we have a whole lot less physical contact with each other.
Mm-hmm.
We have a whole lot less conversation with each other face to face.
Mm-hmm.
There's always a machine between us. Children are spending so much more time on technology. Yeah. The real world has become very, very risky if you don't live in the natural world. But if you live in consolidated environments like cities or even suburbs, you can't let your children just play outside and be part of the natural world anymore, because it's dangerous, because there's a lot of sexual predators out there. There's a lot of people that would do damage to your children. So you have to take them now to some kind of entertainment facility, right? To let them get their steam off instead of being engaged in the natural world that they're part of.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we're already there. You don't have to worry about transhumanism, descending on us. We're already immersed in it. It's just that we can't see it because it's the water we swim in. We don't know it's wet because we're always swimming in it, right? It's our environment now.
Yeah. It sounds fairly bleak when you lay it out that way, but I think there are some glimmers of hope as well. There was just a couple of weeks ago, there was an article in the London Sunday Times about a woman who recruited her 2 teenage sons and a group of their friends to stop using their smartphones and kind of live more in the real world. And they all went out on a camping trip by themselves, no adult supervision. And so she wrote about the really positive impacts that came from that for her kids. They did it begrudgingly, but they did it, and they actually really enjoyed it. They loved going out on a camping trip by themselves, and it wasn't dangerous. I mean, they may have done some risky things, but they all survived.
I love that. I mean, I would love to see like a new movement start, like let's get back to nature,
Yeah.
I mean, it would be so helpful. And if you don't want to be a part of this virtual reality, if you don't want humanity to go in this direction, then you have to pull out. You have to unplug at least some of the time. You have to do it.
Yeah.
I can't even read a full book anymore.
No, I know.
I skim the book. I graze it. I used to be a prolific reader. I used to read like giant tomes of books.
Yeah.
I used to read Dostoevsky. I couldn't do it today.
I know.
Couldn't do it.
I feel the same way, and it's a very sad thing about my own aging life. Is I can't read books anymore. My attention span isn't there. The interesting thing, just going back to the article that I was just mentioning, that one of the interesting things one of the hopeful things is that it can be reversed. She recruited them to do this for a month, and it's really important that they did it with their group of friends, because it wouldn't have worked if it was just the two sons alone. They would have just become outcasts. So all their group of 8 friends all did it together. Yeah. One thing she found, though, is it was really difficult to get girls to volunteer. So there really is a difference. Like, girls are more imbued into the social media where all this indoctrination and cult-like aspect is happening. And it's harder to get them out of it. Have you seen that as you're going through your research on this transgenderism as well, that girls are uniquely vulnerable?
Yes, but they're also, they're sexualized in a way that boys aren't, when they start to develop their sexual characteristics start to develop. They're sexualized through pornography, and the pornography that basically exists in mainstream media, on music stages and everywhere else, So they're highly, highly sexualized. And, if they don't sexualize themselves, then they're boring. They're like nerds and they don't get any attention, so this is really, they're sexually traumatized is what's happening to them. And so they dissociate sexually, because they're being sexually traumatized by pornography, and how that pornography impacts young men, who then, put it into their relationships. And also young women are watching pornography now. So this is their sexual education. And they're not, we're not prepared for that, for the pornography that's out there today, that they can just open up their smartphone, type in porn, and holy God, what comes up is not like, 1960s picture of a naked woman. That's not what's there. No.
Yeah.
I mean, you have women being multiply penetrated, being called like the most vile names imaginable. This is what they see. And it's like, wow, they're being traumatized into a state of dissociation, physical dissociation. You can't have, two generations of porn accessible in the mainstream, and not have it impact the population. You can't have that. It's sexual objectification. And now we have transsexualism made into an industry, which is really, it's the pinnacle of sexual objectification. You are objectifying human reproductive sex. You're commodities now. We're all commodities. We might as well get a barcode stamped on our arm,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
People really need to unplug, and they need to unplug their families, and they need to organize with other people to unplug. It's hard to unplug. I mean, as an individual that's, on social media a lot, because I'm trying to get a pulse on where this is going, and I write. So I'm on my computer for that. And I have my cell phone. It's like, if I leave my cell phone at home, whoa, I mean, I have a physical reaction to that. That's really not good.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Our brains have been completely reshaped because of this technology.
Exactly.
And I think we're only just starting to realize that now. But we've been using this technology for decades. So, the other physiological changes that may have happened, we don't even know yet. And like you said, we don't recognize it because this is the world we live in now. So we don't even think about how it might have changed us because we don't feel it.
Right. We just go running out to the new smartphone, right? And all the accoutrements.
There have been some small changes happening around this. Certain clinics that were doing these surgeries have now either stopped or put more kind of gates around them. Some of the major institutes like the Tavistock Institute in Great Britain have been exposed in some ways. So some of this is starting to come out into the light, which is a good thing. What can people do once their eyes start opening to this to contribute to that conversation, to help to bring more sunlight to this?
I think the most important thing we can do is to talk about the roots of the issue in fetish and industry, and how this is moving us out of a human space into a transhuman space. I think this is a vital conversation that's not being had enough. Mm-hmm. People are, and I get this, I mean, people are really see the urgency in stopping the actual harms to children and to women's rights. So they're out there fighting at these different fronts. But it's kind of like playing whack-a-mole unless you actually address the root cause of the issue. Why is the sexual binary being deconstructed? This is the most important question that people need to be asking. This should be asked at the IOC, the International Olympics Committee. Yeah. It should be asked of the people that are running that show. It should be asked for every medical institution that you visit, for every college that you visit or taught in. Why is the sexual binary being deconstructed? For what purpose? Who does this serve?
Right.
Yeah. So I think that, hopefully my book will drive people to start asking those questions and getting answers, because otherwise, you're just playing whack-a-mole. This thing is gargantuan. It's gargantuan. They are well prepared. It's global.
Yeah. I think also people can just stop participating. So when they have those little forms that say, are you male, female, or 10 other little boxes, just, bring it up to somebody and say, why did you change this form? There's really only 2 options here. Why do you have 10? Just stop participating. Stop just pretending like this is normal, I think.
And stop talking about transgender people. There are no transgender people. Transgenderism is a system, a political, corporate, economical system that is trying to dissociate us from biological reality. It's not a type of person. There is no transgender community. People are having these assaults on their reproductive systems for myriad different reasons, because they're homosexual in a homophobic culture, because they have a fetish of adult men to want to own womanhood, because they're autistic and they've been told this is, why they feel so different, because they're vulnerable in other ways. There's so many different reasons that people are doing this. You can't just put it all under one umbrella and call it, oh, this is what it is,
Right.
It's just to normalize it for the public, Transgender sounds so much better than transsexual, doesn't it? I mean, especially for children. You're going to change your sex. No, you're transgender. You have a certain feeling inside that you want to accommodate.
The changes to the language have been perhaps the most insidious part of this so-called movement, where, gender fluid, it sounds so nice. And why would you want to be rigid? Nice. Wouldn't you want to be fluid or flexible?
Or just centric.
Yeah, it is crazy. We live in the United States, and so it's hard to sometimes remember the outside world. Is this happening as much in other places, or is it largely centered around the United States?
It's happening broadly in Western cultures. I mean, Australia, New Zealand, Ireland, Scotland, the UK are all inundated with this stuff. They're inundated with this stuff. People have to come out of the trance that they're in. This is not just a medical scandal. The medical industry is serving this ideology, but this ideology is unto itself. It's a technological cult to indoctrinate the public into dissociating from biological reality. Anybody that tells anybody else that it's progressive to take your sexual anatomy and basically rearrange it or take it off or destroy it with drugs, they're in a cult. It's a cult. Got to get out of the cult. Because even people that are out of the cult, who think they're out of the cult, are still in the cult.
Yeah.
So it's very, very difficult.
Yes. Are you considered somewhat of a kind of alt-right radical now because of the work that you're doing and the conversations you're having?
I don't pay a whole lot of attention to any of that. I basically have my head down, like researching and writing, and sharing my work.
Right.
I've been called different things. Crazy, tinfoil hat, anti-Semitic, lunatic, whatever.
Right. Right. Yeah.
I don't care. I just keep going because it's imperative that we get up to speed. That people get up to speed. I mean, the technology is moving so fast, and they are rearranging our perceptions about ourselves, our reality, so fast that people need to get up to speed while you're fighting a a medical scandal, this is all growing, it's like, come on, up to speed, up to speed.
Well, I think your book is a great place for people to start getting up to speed. So tell people how they can find the book and your work and learn more about what you do.
Oh, sure. They can go to Spinifex Press, which is my publisher. Wonderful, wonderful women over at Spinifex Press. And you can get it on Amazon. And I relish the idea that Jeff Bezos, who's invested in this industry, is selling my book. So anybody that doesn't want to buy from Amazon, let me tell you what, it makes me very happy that he's being forced to promote my book. And I'm on Twitter at BJ Portraits. And I have a Substack, J Bilek newsletter.
Yeah, which is amazing and well worth subscribing to. There's lots of
Thank you very much.
stuff there. Super. Well, as we said at the beginning, we could go on and on about this, and there's tons more to talk about. So I hope you'll join us again, and we can have a part two.
Oh, I'd love to, Zahra. This has been one of the most interesting interviews I've had. I really enjoyed it. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much. We're really grateful. Folks, what are your thoughts on what you just heard? Let us know in the comments. Collapse Life is here to have the conversations no one else is having. We aim to open people's eyes and share stories that make you think about things in a new way. And there's no doubt that Jennifer just helped us do that. We're so grateful to guests like Jennifer for sharing their time and their talents with us. If you like what we're doing, please subscribe so we can reach more people like you. We also have a Substack at collapselife.substack.com with news stories several times a week. We're also building an audience on X, and our handle there is @collapse_life. Plus, our merch store has lots of fun products, t-shirts, aprons, mugs, and more. So be sure to check that out. Then we'll see you back here next week with another great guest. Until then, keep your chin up. It's only Collapse. See you soon.